The dim glow of the media room illuminated Elon Musk's face as he sat before a sea of cameras, the sound of flashes clicking like the rhythm of a storm. He leaned forward, his eyes sharp, focused on the live feed broadcast across millions of screens. His lips trembled for a second, the weight of what he was about to say hanging in the air like a toxic cloud. "Enough is enough," Musk's voice rang out, carrying both the cold certainty of a man who had seen too much and the raw emotion of someone who had been wronged. "This is not just a battle for truth. It's a battle for survival. And the people who've been pulling the strings in Washington, people you trust, people you believe in, are at the heart of it all." The audience was silent for a moment, hanging on his every word before the cameras zoomed in. This was no ordinary press conference. This was a takedown. And it wasn't just a takedown of ideas. It was a brutal exposure of the very people who had been manipulating the world from behind closed doors. Musk continued, his words piercing through the air like daggers. Pelosi, Schiff, two names that have been hiding the truth for far too long. Behind their polished facades, they've been orchestrating a corrupt network, benefiting from the very system they pretend to dismantle. The truth is out, and the world is about to see it. A video began to play across the screens. Musk's voice grew colder, more certain. "This is just the beginning. What you're about to witness is a conversation that was meant to stay secret, buried deep in the corridors of power. These two have been using their positions to protect their personal interests, and I've got the evidence to prove it." The video cut to clips of private meetings, shadowed figures in dark rooms, hurried exchanges of money, and whispering voices, a stark contrast to the public images of Pelosi and Schiff. Each scene was damning, each revelation more shocking than the last. As the footage continued, Musk's face hardened, his eyes narrowing. "You've been lied to," he said, his voice unwavering. "This is the truth, whether you want to accept it or not. Pelosi and Schiff, they aren't just politicians. They're masterminds of a deceitful game, and it's time the world knew it." The room erupted in chaos. Reporters screamed questions at Musk, cameras flashing, voices blending into a cacophony of disbelief. The media frenzy was instant, trending across the globe. Social media exploded with a mix of outrage, support, and fear. For a moment, the chaos around him seemed to fade as Musk sat back in his chair, staring at the screen. The weight of what he had just done was sinking in. He had stepped into the ring with the most powerful people in the country, and there was no going back. The next day, the media landscape was engulfed by the storm Musk had unleashed. Talk shows debated his accusations. Social media was ablaze with the leaked video, and pundits speculated about the truth behind the revelations. Pelosi and Schiff, once pillars of political authority, now found themselves cornered. The walls were closing in. They hadn't been prepared for this. Musk had given them no chance to mount a defense, no time to plot their next move. The truth, raw, unforgiving, had been exposed in the harshest way possible. Pelosi's office was in disarray. She stood at the window, her back to the world, staring out at the Washington skyline. The weight of the scandal threatened to crush her, and the once unshakable figure seemed fragile, vulnerable. Her fingers gripped the edge of the desk, knuckles white. "How the hell did he get this?" she muttered, her voice low and strained, her lips twisted in frustration. Schiff stood behind her, equally unsettled. His face, usually composed, was now pale. "It doesn't matter how he got it. What matters is how we get ahead of this. If we don't, it's over." Pelosi turned sharply, her eyes meeting his. There was a flicker of something in her gaze, a crack in the veneer of her political armor. "You didn't warn me about this. I trusted you, Adam. I trusted him. And now look at what we have to deal with." Schiff's jaw clenched, his hands tightening into fists at his sides. "I told you not to get involved with him. You wanted this alliance. Now we both have to deal with the consequences." "Don't pin this on me," Pelosi snapped. "You were just as involved. Now, we need to find out who else knows. We need to control the narrative, or they'll tear us apart." Across the room, a phone buzzed, interrupting the tension. Pelosi picked it up, her fingers trembling as she read the message. "It's a message from one of our donors. He's backing out." Schiff's face darkened. They're all going to run. We need to fix this, Nancy. Fast. The next evening, the tension continued to rise. Musk sat alone in his office, the screens before him glowing with the constant updates from the media. He ran a hand through his hair, his eyes flicking back and forth as he read through the latest reports. His phone buzzed an encrypted message. They're starting to fight back. Musk's eyes narrowed. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. He could feel the weight of the battle pressing down on him. But something else gnawed at him. A strange sense of satisfaction, of justice finally being served. His phone rang. It was his lawyer, a sharp, pragmatic woman named Rachel. Elon, you need to stop this. Rachel's voice crackled through the line. You're playing with fire. You've already pushed them into a corner, and they're not going down without a fight. I'm not backing down, Musk replied, his voice hard. This is bigger than any one of us. It's about exposing the truth, no matter the cost. Rachel sighed. The cost could be more than you're prepared for. Pelosi is dangerous. Schiff is ruthless. You think they'll let this slide? No, Musk said flatly. But they're going to have to fight harder than they think. The tension crackled in the air between them. Musk's determination was palpable, but so was Rachel's concern. She had known him long enough to understand that he wasn't backing down. But this time, the stakes were higher than ever before. I'll handle the legal mess, she said. But you're walking a fine line here. Just remember, you don't get to undo what you've done. Musk hung up the phone, staring at the screen once more. The video had done its damage, but the real battle was just beginning. And in the end, it wouldn't just be about exposing the truth. It would be about surviving the fallout. Elon Musk sat alone in his sleek, glass-walled office, the glow of city lights shimmering outside. But he felt like an island in the storm. A man who had defied the odds in everything he touched: technology, space exploration, even public image. Yet here, in this moment, he was confronted with something far more personal, far darker. The world had already witnessed his brilliance, but few knew the crippling weight that followed. He stared at his phone screen, watching a live stream of a political debate. Pelosi and Schiff were at the forefront, smiling, shaking hands, giving speeches designed to calm the masses. He clenched his jaw, as if holding back an anger so deep it could burn the very foundations of the world he'd built. Musk wasn't just a tech mogul. He wasn't only battling against rockets or electric cars. He was fighting something more insidious now: political corruption. The election was looming, and the stakes were rising. Musk had always kept a distance from politics, until now. But a chance encounter had led him to believe that these two figures, Nancy Pelosi and Adam Schiff, had manipulated more than just the electorate. They had played the game for too long, using their power for something far worse than the public knew. He knew they held the keys to a dark, hidden world, and Musk intended to expose it, no matter the cost. He wasn't a politician. He wasn't even a man of typical ambition. But the truth had become his obsession. The truth about what they had done. Nancy Pelosi had seen the storm coming long before most realized it. As she sat at her grand desk, papers and speeches scattered around her, she gazed out at the distant skyline, the same one that had framed her years of power. But it wasn't the world outside that preoccupied her. It was the one behind closed doors. Her phone buzzed, another alert from her campaign manager. The pressure was building. She had long since learned the art of controlling her image, smiling for the cameras, feigning grace, while pulling strings in the shadows. Power was never pretty, but it had always been hers. Still, despite her confidence, Pelosi felt a gnawing unease creeping in. This time, it wasn't just the press. It was something deeper, something more dangerous. Her legacy was on the line, and with every passing day, it slipped further from her grasp. If Musk had his way, she would be nothing but a relic of a corrupt era. She couldn't allow that. Not after all she had sacrificed. Not when the stakes had grown so high. The election was just the beginning. And then there was Adam Schiff, standing beside her, just as unsettled. He had always been the quieter one, the more calculating of the two. His reputation as a principled man of justice was built on the very lies that now threatened to dismantle it. The facade of righteousness he wore like armor was beginning to crack. Adam Schiff was more than just a politician. He was a survivor, with the dark secrets of his past simmering under the surface. He had built his career on alliances that had never been fully revealed. His dealings in the underbelly of political maneuvering had served him well, until now. Musk's rise had exposed a vulnerability in their world, one that Schiff had hoped to keep buried. When Pelosi looked at him, she saw someone who had always been a means to an end. But Schiff knew she was also his tether to power. His own insecurities, a fear of being discarded, forgotten, haunted him. The quiet whispers of his own secret dealings with lobbyists, foreign powers, and dark money filled his mind as the walls began to close in. He had spent years climbing, fighting, clawing his way to the top. The idea of losing it all to someone like Musk, someone who had no regard for the rules they had all played by, was unbearable. Schiff knew how to spin the narrative, how to manipulate the truth, but Musk wasn't playing by the same rules. The election was imminent, and the nation was divided. The Democratic stronghold, once secure, now faced a surge of new challengers. The Republicans were fragmented, but their message was loud, clear, and growing stronger. Musk, despite his outsider status, had become a symbol of change. His rise wasn't just about electric cars and rockets. It was about his belief in exposing the ugly truths hidden by the political elite. In the midst of this, Pelosi and Schiff were at the peak of their power, but the pressure was mounting. The polls were tightening. The scandals were coming to light. Every whispered accusation seemed to have some truth behind it, and they knew they couldn't keep the lid on their secrets for much longer. Musk's investigation had uncovered more than just political corruption. He had found traces of a much darker conspiracy, one that linked Pelosi and Schiff to a powerful group of billionaires, foreign entities, and deep-pocketed donors, people who were willing to stop at nothing to protect their interests. For Musk, this wasn't just politics, it was personal. He had been betrayed by the very system he had once believed could drive progress. The more he uncovered, the more the walls between his ambition and his personal life crumbled. His loneliness deepened. The emotional voids that had once been filled with work and success now echoed with doubt and betrayal. Who could he trust now? He needed answers, and he would stop at nothing to get them. Musk, in his isolation, had started to reflect on his own vulnerabilities. The weight of his own ambition had come at a cost. Relationships had frayed. Even the people closest to him, his family, friends, his lovers, had slipped through his fingers like sand. There was always someone waiting to take advantage of his loneliness, someone eager to be part of his world only to leave when the spotlight dimmed. Musk had started to ask himself, what if everything I've built is just a facade to hide my own fears? And then there was Nancy Pelosi. Behind the carefully crafted public image of power, she was haunted by the fear of her legacy slipping away. Her family, her daughter, her estranged husband, no longer saw her as a mother or wife, but as a politician who had lost touch with the ones who mattered most. Pelosi's marriage was a cold, distant thing now. What she had built could crumble at any moment. Would it be worth it? And Schiff, his loneliness ran deeper than the others. He was the son of a broken family, raised on the fear of failure. His paranoia, his obsessive need for control, made him suspicious of everyone. Schiff had trusted too many people over the years, only to have them turn against him. The political game he played so well had become a prison, and Musk, with his unrelenting drive, represented the escape route Schiff could never quite find. The scene was set. The pieces were in motion. Musk, Pelosi, and Schiff, three figures, each driven by personal demons, each poised to collide in a battle for truth, power, and survival. And the nation would watch, torn between the forces of truth and manipulation, waiting for someone to expose the other for the fraud they were. The truth would come out, but at what cost? Elon Musk sat in his darkened office, the glow of his computer screen casting a faint, eerie light across his face. The rest of the world was asleep, but not him. Not tonight. He had stumbled upon something that was unraveling faster than he could comprehend. The screen in front of him flickered, displaying pages of documents, emails, and confidential memos that traced the web of corruption surrounding two of the most powerful people in America, Nancy Pelosi and Adam Schiff. Musk leaned closer, eyes narrowing. At first, it had seemed like a few isolated incidents, whispers of financial ties to shadowy figures, vague mentions of off-the-record meetings, and dark money flowing through undisclosed channels. But now, the deeper he went, the clearer the pattern became. It wasn't just corruption. It was a well-orchestrated conspiracy, a sinister alliance between Pelosi, Schiff, and powerful corporate entities. This wasn't just about politics. This was about control. He scrolled further, his heart pounding as his suspicions grew into something far more dangerous than he'd ever anticipated. The documents laid out a history of backdoor deals, manipulative tactics to control public opinion, and clandestine alliances that spanned continents. It was so much more than politics. It was a blueprint for domination, a web so intricately designed that Musk could hardly see the escape. The pieces were falling into place, and he could feel the weight of the discovery pressing down on him. He wasn't sure who could be trusted anymore. His sources, the ones who had given him this treasure trove of damning evidence, had only ever been shadows to him. But now, they were his only connection to the truth. His phone buzzed, snapping him out of his thoughts. A message from Rachel, his lawyer and closest confidant. You need to stop. This is bigger than you think. They won't let this slide. Be careful. He read it 3 times, his fingers gripping the phone tighter with each word. Rachel had always been the voice of reason, the one person who grounded him in the chaos of his world. But tonight, her warning felt like a weight he couldn't carry alone. Pelosi and Schiff were more than just political figures. They were people with power, influence, and networks that stretched far beyond the United States. As he sat back, trying to process everything, the walls of his office seemed to close in. The loneliness that had always been a part of him, the driving force behind his ambition, was now his greatest vulnerability. For the first time in his life, he felt completely isolated. The next day, Musk met with Samantha, one of his closest advisors. She was the one who had introduced him to some of the more unconventional sources who had provided him with the evidence. But as he sat across from her in the sleek conference room, something felt off. The way she was looking at him, too carefully, too knowingly, made him uneasy. You're in too deep, Elon, Samantha said, her voice soft but urgent. These people, you think you're doing the right thing, but you're not. They've been playing you from the start. Musk shook his head. I don't know what you mean. Samantha leaned in, her eyes locking onto his. You think you're exposing them, but what if you're just another pawn in someone else's game? I'm not sure you even know who the real enemy is here. Her words felt like a slap across his face. The very person he had trusted most was telling him he had been manipulated. He wanted to deny it, but the evidence was there. His gut twisted with the realization that, perhaps, he was no better than the people he was trying to expose. You think they're the only ones with power? Samantha continued, her voice colder now. You think they're the only ones playing dirty? What about me, Elon? What about the ones who've been pulling your strings all along? The truth hit him like a freight train. Samantha had been guiding him for months, always one step ahead, always knowing more than she let on. She had been the one to put him on the path to uncovering Pelosi and Schiff's secrets. But now, it seemed like she had been leading him down a road he wasn't prepared for, a road that would ultimately destroy him. He stood up abruptly, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. You've been using me. This whole time, you've been using me. Samantha didn't flinch. I never said I was your friend, Elon. I said I was your ally. There's a difference. Musk turned away, trying to steady his breathing. The feeling of betrayal was suffocating. He had trusted her. More than that, he had relied on her to guide him through this labyrinth of lies. Now, everything felt like a lie. Had he ever been in control of his own decisions? Or had someone else been pulling the strings all along? The weight of the betrayal, combined with the escalating discovery of the conspiracy, took a toll on Musk. He hadn't slept in days. His mind raced constantly, trying to piece together the puzzle, but every revelation only seemed to lead to more questions. His emotions, once cold and calculating, were unraveling. Sitting alone in his dimly lit office, he stared at the files on his desk. His thoughts were jumbled, conflicted. He had come into this with the idea of exposing the truth. He had convinced himself that he was a crusader, fighting against a corrupt political system. But the deeper he delved, the more he realized how murky his own motivations were. Had he started this journey out of a sense of justice, or was it about his own need to be seen as the hero, to make his mark on the world in a way that transcended technology? He had always been driven by ambition, but this felt different. The phone rang, interrupting his spiraling thoughts. It was Rachel again. "Elon, you need to stop. I don't know who you're becoming in all of this, but it's not the person I thought I knew. You've crossed a line, and once you do, there's no coming back." "I can't stop now, Rachel," Musk replied, his voice hollow. "I've seen too much. I have to finish this. I have to bring it all to light." Rachel paused on the other end of the line, her voice softer now. "I get it, but don't lose yourself in the process. You're not alone in this, okay? I'm still here. Just think about what you're doing." He hung up, his fingers trembling. He was starting to question everything. Was this really the truth he was after? Or had he become just another part of the story, a character in someone else's game? As Musk's investigation into Pelosi and Schiff gained public attention, the backlash came quickly. It wasn't just the political elite that took notice. The media, the people who had once celebrated Musk's vision for the future, now turned against him. He had become a target of ridicule, a villain in a story he thought he was controlling. The attacks came in waves, news anchors questioning his motives, pundits accusing him of trying to destroy the political system, and anonymous threats flooding his inbox. The media painted him as a conspiracy theorist, a madman grasping at straws. The more he tried to speak out, the more they twisted his words. One morning, as he walked into his office, a group of reporters ambushed him with microphones, asking questions faster than he could process. "Mr. Musk, is it true that you've been working with foreign entities to take down American leaders? Do you have proof of your allegations against Pelosi and Schiff? Or is this just another one of your publicity stunts?" Musk held his ground, his voice steady but his mind racing. He had the truth on his side, but it felt like the world was conspiring to drown it out. Later that day, he received a chilling message on his phone, a video of a masked man threatening his life, telling him to stop his investigation or face the consequences. The threat was clear. The price of truth had just become a whole lot higher. Musk stood frozen, staring at the screen. He had come too far to back down now. But as the weight of the danger sank in, he felt the familiar pang of doubt. Was it worth it? Would exposing this truth destroy everything he had built? Or was it his only shot at redemption? The political elite wasn't just fighting back. They were playing dirty, and Musk was right in the middle of their game. The question now was, could he survive it? The world felt silent in the moments before Elon Musk stood face to face with Pelosi and Schiff. The tension in the air was so thick it felt like a living, breathing entity, pressing against him from all sides. They were seated in a small, dimly lit room, an office hidden in plain sight, away from the cameras and the prying eyes of the public. This was not a place for politics or speeches. This was the final confrontation. Musk felt his pulse quicken, his mind clouded by the weight of everything that had led to this moment. His fingers, trembling slightly, brushed against the edges of the files that contained the damning evidence. The truth that had once felt so clear was now something heavier, darker, something that seemed to crush him as much as it liberated him. "Do you really believe you're the hero here, Musk?" Pelosi's voice broke the silence, sharp and cold. "You think you're exposing the system? You think you're the only one who's seen the rot?" He stared at her, his mind racing. She looked older than he remembered, her once confident facade now cracked and weary. Schiff, standing beside her, was no better. His eyes betrayed a deep frustration, an anger that seemed more directed at Musk than at the situation itself. "You think you're the only one who suffered," Schiff added, his voice low but venomous. "We didn't get here by choice, Musk. You think this system is something we created? No, we're just cogs in a machine that's far bigger than any of us. A machine that's been turning long before you showed up." Musk felt the sting of those words, a sharp reminder that they were no longer the villains in his story. In some twisted way, they were victims too. The realization sent a jolt of guilt through him. His fingers tightened around the papers in his hands, but he couldn't shake the growing unease inside. "You're trying to tell me you didn't have a hand in this, Musk's voice was almost a whisper, though the anger was evident in his tone. You didn't build the system. You didn't manipulate people, pull the strings, destroy lives just for power. Pelosi met his gaze with a cold, knowing look. It's never been that simple, Elon. Power doesn't just fall into your lap. It's fought for, clawed for. And sometimes, you make deals with the devil just to stay alive. Musk took a step closer, his mind swirling. Was she right? Had he, in his pursuit of justice, become just as tangled in the web of power? The thought left a bitter taste in his mouth. He had spent so much of his life creating and controlling systems, but now he found himself standing at the heart of one that had swallowed him whole. And what about all the people you've destroyed along the way? Musk's voice cracked, his own frustration leaking through. You think they're just collateral damage? I've seen the bodies, the ruined lives. And for what? For the system to continue. Schiff sighed heavily, rubbing his temples. You think we don't feel that? You think we don't see the cost of our actions? But Musk, you're not getting it. There's no way out. There's no escaping the game. You're in it now, too. Musk's world seemed to shift as the truth of their words settled in. What if they were right? What if, by exposing them, he had only become another player in the system he was trying to destroy? The emotional weight of the realization felt unbearable. But before he could speak, the door to the room suddenly burst open. Musk barely had time to react as a masked figure stormed in, a gun raised in the air. His heart skipped a beat. The room erupted into chaos. The figure, faceless and terrifying, moved toward Musk with a speed that left him no time to think. Before he could process, the gun was aimed directly at his head. Enough! The voice came out muffled through the mask, shaking with anger. Enough of this. You're going too far, Musk. Pelosi and Schiff stood frozen, no longer the adversaries they had been just moments ago. They weren't the ones Musk needed to worry about now. Musk's heart hammered in his chest, his thoughts racing. The gunman was real, the danger palpable. His mind, usually sharp, was clouded with fear and disbelief. He never thought it would come to this. Violence had always been something he could control through intelligence, through strategy. But here, in this moment, he was powerless. Who are you? Musk's voice was trembling, barely a whisper, his hands raised instinctively, as if to shield himself. You're asking the wrong questions, Musk, the masked figure growled, his finger tightening on the trigger. You think you're exposing the truth? You're just stirring the pot, and now you're going to pay for it. Musk had no time to react. The gunshot echoed through the room like thunder, but it wasn't directed at him. Instead, the bullet found its mark in the wall beside him, sending a spray of concrete and dust into the air. The figure's eyes burned with fury as he swung the gun toward Pelosi. Get him out of here, he barked, motioning toward Musk with the barrel. But before anyone could move, Musk felt a sharp pain in his chest. His vision blurred as he stumbled backward. A shot. He had been hit. His legs buckled beneath him, and everything went black. Pain. It was all Musk could feel as he slowly regained consciousness. His chest burned. His head throbbed with the pounding rhythm of his pulse. He was lying on the cold floor of the office, the sounds of frantic voices swirling around him like a nightmare. Elon. Rachel's voice cut through the haze. Elon, are you with me? He tried to focus on her face, but his vision kept flickering. He wanted to say something, to reassure her, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, his mind drifted back to the confrontation with Pelosi and Schiff. The gunshot, the realization that he had been just another part of the system, a pawn in a game that had claimed him as its own. Rachel's face hovered over him, her eyes wide with fear. Elon, please. You need to tell me, was it worth it? Was it worth everything? He closed his eyes, the question hanging in the air like a weight. Was it worth it? All the pain, all the destruction. The truth he had fought for now felt like a distant memory. Had he exposed the system, or had he simply become another casualty of it? I don't know, he whispered, his voice barely audible. I thought I could change it all. But change, real, lasting change, came with a cost. A cost he wasn't sure he could pay. And as the world around him began to fade once more, Musk was left with the haunting realization there was no escaping the system. It would take everything from him. His body, his soul, and perhaps even the truth itself. The fallout from Elon Musk's revelations spread like wildfire, scorching everything in its path. The world watched as the political system, once so meticulously crafted, began to crumble under the weight of truth. The chaos was palpable, riots in the streets, political figures scrambling to secure their legacies, and a public divided between those who hailed Musk as a hero and those who saw him as a reckless destroyer. In a crowded newsroom, a young reporter stared at her screen, the headlines scrolling faster than she could keep up. Pelosi and Schiff facing legal consequences as investigations ramp up was the latest, but the truth of it was far darker than anyone could have anticipated. The weight of Musk's words had shattered something inside the political machine, and now there was no going back. Pelosi stood at the center of the storm, her once sturdy figure now cracked, her political empire in ruins. Every news outlet was reporting on the investigations into her dealings, and the public was unforgiving. She had spent years building an image of strength and leadership, but all of it had unraveled in a matter of weeks. Sitting in her office, surrounded by the remnants of her former life, Pelosi felt the sting of public opinion like never before. The legal papers on her desk were as cold as the stone walls around her. She glanced out the window at the bustling city below, her thoughts far from the noise. "I did what I had to do," she murmured to herself, though the words offered no comfort. For the good of the people, for the good of the country. But the cost was undeniable. Her legacy, once so secure, was now a shadow of its former self. She'd fought for power her whole life, never imagining it could all be taken away in an instant. The price of ambition had never seemed so high. Across the country, Schiff was facing his own unraveling. The revelations had stripped him bare, exposing the darkest corners of his career, the deals he had made, and the promises he had broken. No longer the man who had stood in front of cameras, commanding respect, he was now a shell of that figure, shattered and lost. In his small apartment, Schiff paced restlessly, his mind spiraling. He had spent years in the game, playing the role of the principled leader, but now, with his secrets laid bare, he was left with nothing but guilt and regret. His reputation, the one thing he had clung to, was gone. "How did it come to this?" he whispered to the empty room, his hands gripping the sides of his chair. "What happened to the cause I believed in?" The walls closed in on him, his breath quickening as he struggled to breathe through the weight of his own collapse. The truth Musk had exposed was a mirror, and Schiff could no longer deny the image staring back at him. He had become everything he had once despised. As Musk sat alone in his quiet office, the realization hit him with the force of a freight train. His pursuit of justice, the crusade that had once felt so righteous, had left him broken. The world saw him as both a hero and a villain, but the lines were not as clear-cut as they had once seemed. He was alone now, isolated in a way he had never anticipated. The phone calls had stopped coming. The messages turned to silence. His friends, if they had ever truly been his friends, were gone. Even Rachel, the one person who had stood by him, was now distant, her eyes full of uncertainty when she looked at him. "Is this what you wanted?" she had asked him only days before, her voice trembling with the weight of her own fears. "The truth? The cost is too high, Elon. I don't know if I can do this anymore." Musk hadn't known how to answer her. The truth he had fought for had shattered everything. There were no victories here, no sense of justice in the aftermath, just the wreckage of lives torn apart by his quest for the truth. He stood by the window, staring out into the night, his thoughts consumed by the consequences of his actions. Was it worth it? The faces of Pelosi and Schiff haunted him, two people who had made their own choices, but now he was left to carry the weight of their fall. And the people who had believed in him, he had lost their trust too. The public, divided as ever, now saw him as a complicated figure. He was no longer the maverick, the genius inventor. He was a man who had exposed the rot within the system, but had no idea how to heal the wound he had inflicted. The truth had come with a price that seemed impossible to pay. Pelosi sat before her lawyer, her hands clasped tightly together. The courtroom had become her new battleground, one where the odds were stacked against her. Her once dominant position was now a distant memory. The legal ramifications were only the beginning. The public scorn, the whisper campaigns. She had become the symbol of everything that was wrong with the political system. She looked at the framed picture on her desk, a reminder of the days when power felt like it belonged to her. She had given everything for that power. But at what cost? Her mind wandered to the choices she had made, the deals she had struck in darkened rooms, the lives that had been ruined along the way. The weight of it all felt suffocating. "I never thought it would end like this," she whispered, her voice cracking with regret. She had once believed that the sacrifices were justified, but now, with the reality of her situation staring her in the face, she understood the true cost. She had been a prisoner to the very system she had helped create. Schiff, now a shadow of his former self, had taken to seclusion. His days were spent in a haze, the walls of his home closing in on him. The press no longer sought him out. He had become irrelevant. His life, once full of purpose and ambition, now felt meaningless. Every secret, every lie he had told, was exposed for all to see. The man who had once been hailed as a leader was now a cautionary tale. He thought back to the days when he believed he was making a difference, when he had been a part of something greater. But now, he wondered if any of it had ever truly mattered. What was left of his life? What was left of his soul? Musk, too, was a man changed. The hero of his own story was no longer the figure he had once envisioned. He stood in the wreckage of his own making, questioning whether the pursuit of truth was worth the destruction it had caused. The faces of Pelosi and Schiff, once his enemies, were now mere reflections of his own struggle. They had made choices, but so had he. He closed his eyes, the weight of the world pressing down on him. "What now?" he whispered into the darkness. The truth had shattered the system, but had it truly set him free? Or had it only left him with a deeper prison of his own making? As the silence filled the room, Musk understood one thing. There would be no going back. The truth had been exposed, but it had come at a cost. A cost that, for the first time in his life, he wasn't sure he could bear. As the story drew to its inevitable close, the consequences of the past months lingered in the air like a suffocating fog. Musk, Pelosi, and Schiff had all made their choices, choices driven by ambition, fear, and an insatiable hunger for power. Yet, in the end, none of them emerged unscathed. The exposé that had promised justice had instead become a mirror, revealing the fragility of human motives and the moral compromises that festered in the shadows. Elon Musk sat alone in his office, his fingers tapping absently on the cold surface of his desk. The city outside seemed so far away, a blur of lights and noise, as though the world had moved on without him. But within the walls of his own mind, the chaos was still fresh, the echoes of everything he had lost reverberating through his thoughts. He hadn't been prepared for this, not for the weight of the decisions he had made, nor for the emotional toll it had taken. He had sought the truth, believing it would set him free, believing it would cleanse the system. But all he had done was expose the rot, only to find himself trapped in its stench. Was it worth it? He thought, his mind replaying every conversation, every moment of doubt, every person who had stood by him, only to disappear when the dust settled. The sources who had whispered in his ear, promising the world would change, now seemed like ghosts in his memory. The people he had trusted, his family, his friends, they had all been left behind. He closed his eyes, a familiar face coming to mind, Rachel, the one person who had always understood him, who had loved him despite everything. But even she had walked away, unable to bear the burden of his crusade. What good is the truth, he thought bitterly, when it destroys everything you hold dear? The walls of his office felt like they were closing in. His empire, once seemingly unshakable, now felt like a fragile house of cards, ready to collapse with the slightest breeze. Musk had fought for a cause he believed in, but the aftermath had shown him just how far the boundaries of morality could be stretched. His fingers reached for his phone, scrolling through the messages he hadn't opened. Each one was a reminder of what he had lost, his reputation, his relationships, his sense of self. Is this really justice? He wondered. Or is this just another form of destruction? A loud knock on the door startled him. Without waiting for a response, the door creaked open. His assistant, Claire, stood in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "You're still up?" she asked softly, a knowing look in her eyes. You know you could have stopped. All this, it didn't have to go this far. Musk's gaze didn't lift. I couldn't stop. You know that. Not when I saw what was happening behind the scenes. Claire stepped inside, closing the door behind her. I know. But at what cost, Elon? You're not the same person who started this journey. You've changed. He finally met her eyes, the weight of her words sinking in. You're right, he thought. I've become something else. Something I can't undo. Far from Musk's world, Nancy Pelosi sat alone in her office. The weight of her years in power felt heavier now, a burden she hadn't expected to carry. The once vibrant woman, who had fought tooth and nail for every inch of her success, now felt hollow inside. The fallout from her involvement in the exposé had shattered her, and the law had its claws deep in her legacy. Her lawyer had left for the night, and the room was bathed in the cold glow of the desk lamp. She reached for the glass of whiskey that had become her only companion, the glass heavy in her hand as she stared at the papers scattered across the table. This isn't what I wanted, she thought, her fingers trembling slightly as she traced the edges of a legal document. I did what I thought was right. I always believed the system could be changed from the inside. But this is something else. Her mind wandered to the sacrifices she had made, the promises she had broken, the compromises she had tolerated, all for the sake of power. Was it worth it? The question echoed in her head, gnawing at her from the inside. What had it all meant? The legacy, the acclaim, the victory of climbing to the top of the political ladder. All of it now felt so meaningless. Her eyes shifted to a photograph on the wall. Her children, once her pride. They had distanced themselves, their voices silenced by the revelations that had shaken their family to its core. She could feel their disappointment, their anger, seeping through the silence. I thought I was doing the right thing, she thought bitterly. But maybe the right thing isn't always the same as the popular thing. Adam Schiff was pacing the narrow space of his apartment, a shadow of the man who had once commanded the floor of Congress. The lies, the manipulation, the betrayals, everything had come crashing down around him. The truth Musk had exposed had left him with nothing but his guilt. He had convinced himself for years that the ends justified the means, that his manipulation of power was for the greater good. But as the investigations unfolded and his secrets were exposed, Schiff realized he had become everything he once despised. How did I let it go this far? He whispered to himself, staring at the flickering television screen where news anchors dissected his every move. The once proud man had been reduced to a caricature of himself. The public's perception of him was now a mask that no longer fit. He collapsed onto the couch, his hands clutching at his hair, his face twisted in despair. The weight of his decisions was suffocating him. He had sacrificed his soul for the illusion of power, and now there was nothing left but the wreckage of his own creation. The story had unfolded in a way none of them had expected. Musk, Pelosi, and Schiff had all believed that the truth they uncovered would lead to a better world. But in the end, they had each paid a price for their involvement in the system they had tried to expose. The question lingered, unanswered, in the quiet of the room. What is the price of exposing the truth? Musk, his face haggard, looked out into the city that had once been his playground. The truth had been revealed, but it had come with a cost he would never be able to repay. Pelosi, sitting in the silence of her empty office, wondered if she had made the right choices. The sacrifices she had made for power had come with consequences she hadn't fully understood. And Schiff, broken and defeated, asked himself if the pursuit of justice had been worth the destruction of everything he had built. In the end, no one emerged untouched. The price of their moral decisions had been far greater than any of them had imagined. The destructive nature of ambition, betrayal, and the pursuit of truth had left its mark on them all.